I'm Marivel Tarouk. Tonight, we're hearing from the family of a man who died by suicide after taking a lethal substance allegedly sold online by a Mississauga man.
It's just a shame that things like this couldn't have happened sooner. A lot of lives could have been saved, but a lot more are still ready to be saved.
Details on the man accused of providing the substance that police say helped 2 Peel region residents take their own lives, and why he's also at the center of an international investigation. And
we have all kinds of multiple offer situations going on right now, and there's a lot of frustration.
We're looking at how much you'll need to buy a house in Toronto right now. Plus,
we've had one substantial series shut down already.
How the Hollywood film and TV writers' strike is already affecting productions here in Toronto. Good evening. Police have arrested and charged a Mississauga man accused of distributing sodium nitrite online to people who used it to kill themselves. Authorities here launched an investigation after a British newspaper reported that Kenneth Law had sold the lethal drug to people in the UK and the US. Thomas Dagla has the details.
Gary Cooper's brother describes him as brilliant, loved and missed since Gary took a toxic substance last year mailed from Canada to end his life.
He found this website, this forum, before he could get better, so he didn't get a chance to heal. He would still be here now.
Lee Cooper says he was surprised and relieved when he heard police near Toronto had arrested Kenneth Law, the Mississauga man accused of selling sodium nitrite online to people at risk of suicide. The 57-year-old made a brief court appearance by video link, speaking only to confirm his date of birth. Law faces 2 counts of counseling or aiding suicide as police look for more alleged victims.
We're aware that packages were shipped to over 40 countries.
Over the phone last week, Law denied all allegations.
I don't know what's the scope of what I can say, and I hope you can understand why. This has been a very distressing experience.
Families of sodium nitrite victims have been calling for a notorious suicide forum to be shut down. Anonymous users discuss methods of suicide and have posted about Law's companies. In recent days, users in several countries who said they'd ordered Law's products reported receiving police wellness checks out of the blue.
It's just a shame that things like this couldn't have happened sooner. A lot of lives could have been saved, but a lot more are still ready to be saved.
Sodium nitrite has legitimate uses in food preparation, but when ingested in pure form, it's known to turn red blood chocolate brown.
You can even have seizures and go into coma, and you can die because of this change in the hemoglobin.
Law remains in detention, still awaiting a bail hearing. Thomas Dagla, CBC News, Toronto.
The province is cracking down on auto theft, announcing millions of dollars in funding for police services. The government says a vehicle is stolen every 48 minutes in Ontario. One reason behind the increase in car thefts, a measure to stop vehicle thefts in Quebec that's sending criminals here. Loretta Redicop explains.
The province says car thefts keep rising in Ontario, up 14% last year, with thieves often targeting the Greater Toronto area.
Our government is deeply concerned by the increase in car theft, especially when the tool for stealing a vehicle is not just only reprogramming a fob or hot wiring a car, but by the barrel of a gun.
Today, the government announced $50 million over 3 years for police, specifically aimed at cracking down on auto thefts to help dismantle organized crime groups. The Solicitor General had a message for the criminals behind this.
We are putting you on notice. We will be putting you out of business.
Police are seeing a change in where the thieves come from.
And over the past year, we have seen a significant increase in the arrests of organized auto thieves that are coming here locally and throughout Ontario from Montreal and Quebec for the sole purpose of stealing vehicles.
They believe that's because the insurance industry in Quebec adds incentives for drivers with tracking devices, making the market there less lucrative for criminals. Police say they're looking at changes in Ontario to make the devices more available here. One security expert who helps insurance companies fight fraud explains how they work.
Multiple of these tracking devices hidden within the vehicle that's They hide them in a variety of spots. So there could be 6 or 7 of them, and they are dormant. These are sleeping until the vehicle is stolen.
He's glad this announcement also includes money for a team specifically involved in prosecuting auto thefts.
You could steal a vehicle, ship it overseas, and make significant profit. And if you do get caught, the penalties traditionally or historically haven't been significant. So hopefully this will change that.
Police say most of the stolen vehicles in Ontario end up in shipping containers at the Port of Montreal, headed overseas. The government says it's also looking at partnering with Canada Border Services, the RCMP, and shipping and rail companies. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
One person is in hospital after an early morning shooting in Caledon Village. OPP officers were called to a home in the Hurontario and Charleston Side Road area at about 3 this morning. They found one person suffering from an apparent gunshot injury. Paramedics say they rushed a man in his 20s to hospital in critical condition. No other details have been released, but investigators say there is no threat to public safety. Tenants of an Etobicoke apartment building say after almost 3 years of renovations, many projects in their homes have been left unfinished. The company that owns the property claims the renovations were completed last fall. And now the tenants say the relationship with building management has turned hostile. Tyler Cheese met with the building's tenant association to learn more.
Come on in, don't worry about your shoes. As I said, it's as you can see, it's pretty exposed. It's definitely not finished. I don't think anybody would be satisfied with that finished product. Up until the recent purchase of the building, it was very, very well kept, a family-owned and operated business. They took really good care of us.
Tenants at 240 Markland Drive in Etobicoke say they've been living through nonstop renovations since a real estate company bought the building 3 years ago.
When they first came in, they were saying all the right things, like we want to make this a great place for you guys to live.
But as renovations continued, they noticed a number of issues, including excessive noise and dust, garbage left behind by contractors, frequent power outages, and problems with accessibility to the building.
I deal with depression and anxiety for many years, and the last few years it's gotten very bad because I don't feel settled here anymore.
Why the conduit work?
The tenants say their concerns have gone largely unaddressed and the relationship with on-site management has soured. They say it's left them feeling like the owners want them out so they can charge new tenants more in rent.
The on-site property manager here has told me flat out, we don't want you here. If you don't like the way we run the building, you're more than welcome to leave.
In a statement sent to CBC Toronto, the owning company says all residents are welcome to discuss their concerns with on-site management and that most tenants are happy their home is finally being taken care of. The statement did not address the allegations that the owners wish older tenants to move out.
The more rents climb in the city, the more landlords, I think, arguably have an incentive to throw a few elbows or be a little bit rough.
This tenants' rights lawyer says stories like 240 Markland Drive are not uncommon in the GTA.
If it pushes tenants to the point where they say, I can't handle this anymore, I'm moving, well, that serves the landlord's economic interest just fine.
It's been pretty unbearable.
He says the tenants may have a case for compensation at the Landlord-Tenant Board, but the current backlog at the board means their case is unlikely to be heard for months or even years. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
Another dreary day. Colette, what more can we say?
I was just thinking that the trifecta, cold, wet, and dreary. How do you like May so far, right?
Yeah. It could get better.
It is, and it's going to get better. And that's the thing. There is a payoff for the wet weather and the gray skies that we've been experiencing. But we do have to look at what a normal high would be, around 17, a low around 7. And we are just on the cool side of things. Barely, but we got there to 10 degrees for our daytime highs. So we just slid to the double digits. And those readings hanging on into Markham, too, right now. You're seeing that for Kitchener, Hamilton, St. Catharines. Burns at 9 and a little bit cooler there, Oshawa with a current temperature of 8 degrees. And the churning area of low pressure bringing in the waves of rain, that's still here too. We get breaks and then you get some of these heavier downpours like this that's just passing through the west side of the city. So it does make driving a little bit slower too, of course. That slows everything down. There's that circulation. And what is different today is that the western edge of it, or the primary western edge, has moved eastward. It was back over here. It is moving away from us. And with that, we see less showery activity tomorrow, but there is still going to be some there, Miraval. And then into Friday, we do even better. So baby steps here. We're coming out of it.
The steps could be bigger for me, but that's fine.
Yeah,
I'll wait.
leaps.
Right? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayoral candidate Olivia Chow says she has a plan to bolster transit in Scarborough, and she says she'll pay for it by pulling down a section of the Gardiner Expressway. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords has the details.
For an idea aimed at getting people moving, mayoral candidate Olivia Chow had some trouble launching her latest policy. Chow's campaign had chosen the SRT stop beside Scarborough Town Centre to announce her plan to improve East End transit. But her event was overtaken by striking workers at a federal building next door.
Okay, I was stopped at chat. 5 minutes, yeah.
So Chow decided, if you can't beat them, join them. She dove into the middle of the line with workers. A short distance away, she reiterated her policy pitch. She wants to build a $60 million dedicated busway to help Scarborough transit riders. That would replace the aging SRT when it's retired this fall. Chow says she'd pay for it by scrapping part of the Gardiner Expressway.
We can find it from the Gardiner coming down as a boulevard. As to how much, some people say that Gardiner coming down will save $300 million, but it's maybe $100 million. We don't know as yet, but certainly there'll be enough to do this, paving this and having making it a lot faster for Scarborough residents.
In 2016, councillors decided to spend just over $1 billion to replace the eastern portion of the expressway. At that time, knocking it down and adding a boulevard east of Jarvis would have cost about half as much. Ever since, a number of councillors and community groups have pushed to revisit that decision. Chow says her plan doesn't pit suburban drivers against Scarborough transit riders.
It doesn't matter whether you're stuck behind traffic in a car or on a bus, you're still stuck. And no, we're not pitting one against another. What we're doing is to say that let's get unstuck.
Mayoral candidate Brad Bradford wants to head in the opposite direction. He says if construction were allowed 24/7, it would shave 2 years off the project.
This will reduce the gridlock and get you home or get you to work faster.
And he took a shot at the other mayoral candidates who want to stop the rebuild.
There are some folks in this race who actually want to reopen debates from 7 years ago and ask for more studies. That would increase the cost with delays and inflationary pressures and rob people of time in their lives as they sit in the gridlock caused by political gridlock.
Chow and Bradford aren't the only mayoral candidates to take a position on the Gardiner Expressway's future. Anna Bailau wants the province to upload both it and the DVP. And Josh Matlow thinks that money could be saved by reverting to the boulevard option. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
Housing is also a major issue on the mayoral campaign trail, and today promises were made to build more of it and keep it affordable. Ali Chiasson has the latest.
I had someone telling me I have to stay in this bachelor because I can't afford to move anywhere else.
Mayoral candidate Anna Bailau was speaking to renters today who told her they're feeling stretched thin and priced out.
We need to create more purpose-built rental. We need to protect the rental that we have. We need to give the security and to make sure that if they're presented with renovation eviction situations, that we have the assistance to protect our tenants in the city.
Meanwhile, Mark Saunders says things are the way they are because the city is slow to build housing.
I'm not putting it on city councilors at all. I'm putting on the existing process. And I'm saying that the process has to change.
So what does he propose?
Tomorrow, we'll be speaking on that.
My plan talks about zoning review. My plan talks about creating the missing middle. My plan talks about adding more density on our main streets. I think it's a fair criticism for everybody to demand that he puts a plan forward that is actually going to address the housing issue.
Staying out of the back and forth between Bailão and Saunders, candidate Anthony Perruzza stands outside the quad at York University. He says this style of build can help unlock housing supply.
It's housing that could be used for transitional housing, it could be used for seniors, it could be adapted for shelters, but it's doable. You could build this within a couple of years. Within 2 years, you could have it up and running. What Toronto needs is smart housing solutions that can be built fast.
That urgency was felt at each podium today.
Everyone has stated that we are in a crisis state, and we are.
But the reality is, with the city in a $1 billion shortfall, whomever the next mayor is won't be able to solve the housing crisis alone.
And we need a mayor that is going to work with council, and we need somebody that has a track record of working with the other orders of government. I think people feel this is a city of opportunity, but it's in jeopardy if we don't tackle this issue.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
It's going to get,
Toronto's home prices still aren't where they were during last spring's peak, but according to the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, the numbers are inching closer. Let's take a look at the new data. The average selling price in the GTA was over $1.15 million in April 2023. That's about 4% higher than last month, but it's still down compared to April 2022. Sales are also up 9% compared to March.
As we've moved through the first 4 months of 2023, we have seen a gradual improvement in the demand for ownership housing, and it's really across all segments. We saw, sort of similar growth in prices on a month-over-month basis, across home types.
But on a year-over-year basis, new listings were down by more than 1/3.
We have all kinds of multiple offer situations going on right now. Well, I think we're back to a more traditional spring market, but the only problem is we don't have inventory.
Fewer listings means more competition, and that's what's keeping prices high and really unaffordable for the average Torontonian. Let's take a look at how much a household would need in order to qualify for a $1 million home in today's current market. By the way, this bungalow in Scarborough is what a $1 million listing looks like. According to ratehub.ca, a household would have to make over $193,000 a year to afford this home. That's based on the following assumptions: a 20% down payment, 25-year amortization, around $4,000 in property taxes, and a 5-year fixed mortgage rate of 5.39%. The monthly payments on that would be almost $5,000, but you'd actually have to be able to prove that you could afford almost $6,000 a month.
Stress test is at 7.39%, which is 2 percentage points higher than the mortgage rate you're paying. That's why the income is so high at $193,000. If it weren't for the stress test, the income required to qualify would be a bunch lower.
Some people in the industry expect the demand for home ownership will continue to rise, noting that buyers that were previously on the sidelines have since come to terms with the higher interest rates.
Everybody seems to be used to the new environment that we have right now. Higher interest rates and prices that have settled a little bit, but seem to be on the rebound.
But not everyone is convinced that the market is officially on the upswing.
We think the economy nationwide is going to slip into a recession. We also think the lagged impact of interest rate increases from the Bank of Canada from last year are still flowing through to the economy and to households and consumers.
No one has a crystal ball, but real estate experts say a lack of supply and a great need for more housing will continue to play a role in shaping the market. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Well, it certainly wasn't the outcome the Leafs or their fans wanted in their series opener against the Panthers.
I think it's just about executing and, a bounce here or the other way and, maybe a couple, mistakes that we made that, we clean up and it's a different outcome. But
those guys were really good last night and we allowed them to be, even better than what we would have expected.
The Leafs dropping Game 1, 4-2. They had some excellent scoring opportunities late in the game, but just couldn't beat a very sharp Sergei Bobrovsky in net for Florida. Game 2 goes tomorrow night at 7 at Scotiabank Arena. With the Hollywood film and television writers on strike, there are concerns for the industry north of the border. Meg Roberts has more on what happens here if the labor dispute drags on.
As writers in the States put down their pens and pick up a sign, the Canadian industry is bracing for impact.
We've had one substantial series shut down already.
After failing to reach a new contract Tuesday, the Writers Guild of America informed its members that all script writing is to immediately stop. Writers are seeking pay increases from production companies and large studios. The Guild says working conditions have declined due to streaming, with jobs having smaller writing rooms and shortened seasons.
And the end of the day, writers are getting squeezed financially.
Sister organization, the Writers Guild of Canada, says a number of its members work in the United States, and it's asked its members to refrain from pitching or working for American production companies.
It's going to be painful. This is going to be a really hard thing for the writers to do, but we have to hold strong and be tough and make sure that the streamers know we mean business.
However, he says the Canadian industry has similar concerns, which will come up in the fall when it's supposed to negotiate a new contract.
We're dealing with a lot of the same issues: shorter contracts, lower wages, more development work, less work in production.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Canadian actor Cynthia Zhou, who's shooting a short film in Toronto, says the strike has now put her out of acting work.
It is very, very rough for both me and a lot of my film crew friends who have, basically are unemployed now because there's nothing being written.
But she says regardless, she's standing in solidarity with the writers and believes they're leading the way for others in the industry.
Really, at the end of the day, it's about all the workers at the bottom fighting fighting against exploitation from the big streamer companies.
The Canadian Guild says the strike could last a while, as these streamers may have a number of programs already shot and may look internationally for new content. Meg Roberts, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up, Conservative MP Michael Chong says he wasn't told about threats by the Chinese government targeting his family.
The government knew about this 2 years ago and they did nothing.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's brother, Alexandre Trudeau, went before the Parliamentary Committee today, where he testified about a donation to the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation from businessmen with ties to the Beijing regime. We'll bring you those stories and more when we come back. Questions and accusations continue to swirl around the case of a federal MP who was reportedly targeted by the Chinese government. Security documents reveal that Canadian officials knew about the attempt at foreign interference 2 years ago, but they did not inform Conservative MP Michael Chong. As Rafi Boudjikanian reports, the Prime Minister says new directives are being put in place to ensure information is being shared.
Even after meeting with CSIS, the Prime Minister, and the Public Safety Minister, the MP allegedly in Beijing's crosshairs still has questions.
What is new here, what is at issue, is that the government did nothing about a person in Canada that was targeting me and my family and targeting other members of Parliament.
That person, the Globe and Mail reported, based on a nearly 2-year-old CSIS document it has seen, is a member of China's State Security Service. And the newspaper reports it's Zhao Wei, a Chinese diplomat stationed in Toronto. CBC News has not independently verified this reporting.
I think the Prime Minister and the government, ministers, have to come clean about who knew what and when.
Today, the Prime Minister suggested it was the spy agency which had decided not to flag the intelligence about Chong.
CSIS made the determination that it wasn't something that needed to be raised to a higher level because it wasn't a significant enough concern.
While the official opposition says that can't be right.
It is impossible to believe that he was not made aware of these threats 2 years ago when they were documented by his own intelligence services. How does the Prime Minister expect us to believe such a ridiculous claim?
But a former director of the spy agency warns against oversharing with elected officials.
There is some perception out there that everything that CSIS knows should be passed up the chain. It doesn't work that way. This case may be an easy one. There may be other cases where the information may be more sensitive and it may be very hard to pass that information on.
We're making it very, very clear to CSIS and all our intelligence officials that when there are concerns that talk specifically about any MP, particularly about their family, those need to be elevated, even if CSIS doesn't feel that it's a sufficient level of concern for them.
Repeatedly asked about consequences for the diplomat in question, the Canadian government says there would be some upon evidence of criminal activity. The Chinese embassy here has not responded to our requests for comment. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
The brother of the Prime Minister has made an appearance in front of the Commons Ethics Committee. Alexandre Trudeau is a member of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. The committee wants to know about his involvement in arranging a major donation to the foundation from a Chinese billionaire.
I was giving the approval for the Université de Montréal to use the name of my father, so acting as a family member, to say that the Université de Montréal could be using the name of Pierre Trudeau to launch a scholarship program.
The Trudeau Foundation funds and promotes academic and public interest research. The committee has been investigating whether a promise of $200,000 was part of an influence campaign by the Chinese government to get to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The Prime Minister says he has not been involved in the foundation's activities for nearly a decade. A mass shooting at a school in Serbia has left 8 students and a security guard dead. Several other people were seriously injured. A 18-year-old was arrested at the school. He was armed with his father's handgun. Police say he meticulously planned the attack, making drawings of the classrooms and preparing a list of victims. 6 students and a teacher were injured. Russia is accusing Ukraine of launching a drone attack on the Kremlin. It's being characterized as a failed attempt to assassinate Russian President Vladimir Putin, as Moscow says it reserves the right to retaliate. Briar Stewart reports.
In daylight, people can be seen on top of the dome of the Kremlin Senate. It's part of what's supposed to be a heavily secured fortress that Russia has accused Ukraine of trying to attack overnight. This video hasn't been verified, but the Kremlin claims its military and defense systems brought down 2 drones. Russian officials are calling it a terrorist attack. An attempt to kill President Vladimir Putin, whom they say was staying at a residence outside the city. Ukraine's president, who's in Helsinki, denied his country is involved.
We don't attack Putin or Moscow. We fight on our territory. We are defending our villages and cities.
U.S. officials say they haven't been able to verify Russia's claims, but have their doubts.
I would take anything coming out of the Kremlin with a very large shaker of salt.
Over the weekend, Russia blamed Ukraine for striking a fuel depot in Crimea. But if there was a foiled attack on the Kremlin, it's brought the war even closer to the capital. Moscow has promised retaliation, and the country's former president said there are no options left except to physically eliminate Zelensky and his clique.
What really became suspicious is, how come the air defense system didn't catch this object before?
This Russia expert says the fact that Moscow publicized this apparent strike when it has concealed other attacks suggests this is political.
I think what he needs is the domestic support, and this really would give him sort of the domestic agreement from the population to sort of hit harder. So yes, I think this could be a sort of there's an internal component to this.
Even as Ukraine is about to launch its counteroffensive, Russia insists that it's going ahead with its annual Victory Day military parade, but with tighter security. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
King Charles will be crowned in a few days, and preparations are underway in London. The event is rich in tradition, but comes with security concerns. Chris Brown explains.
The top hats, tails, and fashionable fascinators are all coming out as the momentum builds towards the crowning of a new king. Charles, along with Camilla, the Queen consort, mingled with some of their well-groomed subjects and a few famous visitors, such as singer Lionel Richie at a garden party.
It's nice to see everyone, irrelevant to who or where they come from. Everyone gets together. It's a big one party, isn't it?
But it's a party happening against an unprecedented security backdrop. Monday night, a man threw shotgun cartridges onto the grounds of Buckingham Palace in what police called a mental health issue, not terrorism. Still, facial recognition cameras are being used, and anti-monarchist groups have been told they must behave.
We have an extremely low tolerance for anything or anyone who comes to disrupt this event.
Tourism officials are expecting potentially 2 million extra visitors. Canadian bagpiper Nico Gravel from Ottawa got here early, and he's busking his way around the coronation venues.
You know, in my lifetime, how many times am I going to see a king being crowned? You know, trying to brighten the mood and trying to do my part.
Others are doing that through street art. Nathan Bowen told us he's not really a monarchist, but is still offering his own take on the new king and queen.
I said it's part of our country, innit? We've got to deal with it. So, you know, why not make art out of it? Why not make it into something that's fun and exciting?
Predictably, there are already early arrivers camping out at the best spots, and some got a sneak peek at the royals arriving at Westminster Abbey for a rehearsal. While the coronation will be rich in tradition, this historian says its most important role will be making a statement about Britain's present and its future.
Sustainability, cost of living, green issues, they're all at the agenda. Charles III very much pushing that. And the same with inclusivity, a wider faiths being represented. So it's very much a 21st century coronation.
Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
While excitement is building in many corners of the Commonwealth, some residents in Jamaica are less than thrilled. Ellen Morrow reports on a movement there to remove Charles as head of state.
This is Emancipation Park in Kingston, the capital of Jamaica. And that statue there behind me is a tribute to the hundreds of thousands of people stolen from Africa and enslaved on this island for centuries under British rule. So as preparations for the coronation are going on in London, this country is getting ready to ditch the monarchy. The government here planning to hold a referendum with the goal of becoming a republic and removing Charles as head of state by 2025. And it's the painful legacy of slavery that's driving that movement. We've been here for several days talking to lots of people who've told us that removing Charles as head of state is important for Jamaica's future and its identity. We talked to a group of students on their last day of high school getting ready to be this country's future, and this is what they told us.
It further pushes Eurocentric ideals because I feel like we'd like to have our own Caribbean identity, and I feel like the presence of a monarchy really impedes that.
Are we really emancipated if we still have a head of government, a monarchy which is honestly archaic in nature?
It's not just about cutting ties and removing Charles as head of state. There's also a demand here for an official apology from the royal family, which was linked to the slave trade from the very beginning, and for there to be reparations for all the suffering inflicted on this island and for the immeasurable wealth that was taken from it.
We plan to petition the king and to seek reparations through that petition, because as the Queen and now the King's subjects, we suffered injustices, and they were responsible for us.
Jamaica is not the only country having this conversation. Barbados removed the monarch as head of state in 2021, and several other Caribbean countries are contemplating this move as well. A reckoning for the brutality of British colonialism in this region as Charles's coronation looms. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Kingston, Jamaica.
really hanging on to that light at the end of the tunnel that you were talking about earlier, Colette.
Yeah, we just don't have the heat here right now. I thought, well, let's go find where we do have it in the country. How about a heat warning here in early May in parts of central Alberta? And yes, that includes Edmonton, highs near 30 degrees. Lows that are actually warmer than our daytime highs. And they've got yet another day of this to go with this kind of extreme heat. And then even after that, temperatures still in the 20s for a couple of days. So let's just kind of check in on the temperatures. How about currently 29 degrees in Edmonton, Calgary 27. And by the way, it's not just heat warnings. There are severe thunderstorm watches in parts of the region too, to the west and north of Calgary. So they're getting very summertime like weather there. 21 in Winnipeg, and then here we are in the eastern half of the country dealing with the cool air, and boy, oh boy, Atlantic Canada, yeah, they're sitting around 2-3 degrees. So we're doing a little better to have some double digits on the board here with our current temperatures. Still looking at those winds, not terribly strong, but that just gives it a cooler feel. It's already damp, and then at times we get some heavier downpours in here with this rotation around the area of low pressure. It is slowly, too slow for most, moving eastward, and we'll get out of this pattern. But for tomorrow, we're still looking at scattered showers. Now, what I expect is that we'll have some sunny breaks here and there, and that's actually going to enhance the instability and just lead to the showers. But at times, don't be fooled if you get a bit of sun coming through and it seems dry. We're not necessarily out of it. Still have the umbrella around because we'll still have a few scattered showers there, and then just an isolated shower risk as we go into Friday. Much of this moisture is actually going to be drying up before it makes its way towards us. So we won't worry too much about that one. We are going to get back into a high pressure pattern. Tonight, though, a bit of patchy fog, few intermittent showers coming through. Where'd we go? And tomorrow morning, 7 degrees. Again, some fog early, and then we should see that dissipating 10 degrees for the high, and then we really start that nice climb. Okay, not Edmonton temperatures, but pretty good.
Yeah, it's no 30, but that's way better than what we have now. You're right.
It's going to be a great weekend.
Okay, thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Authorities in Quebec have found the bodies of 2 volunteer firefighters swept away by floodwaters on Monday. Both men were trying to help residents in the flood-ravaged region of Charlevoix. Marina von Stackelberg reports.
For days, rescuers have combed this area northeast of Quebec City, searching for 2 part-time firefighters swept away by river currents. The pair were trying to help residents trapped by rising waters. The bodies of 55-year-old Régis Lavoie and 23-year-old Christopher Lavoie have now been found. The 2 firefighters were not related. The apparent drownings happened in the Charlevoix region, in the Bay St. Paul area, as water levels rose on the Rivière de Gouffre.
I think they were in really good faith, trying to help. They, of course, didn't think that it would go so fast.
Quebec's premier toured the devastation, where water also swept away vehicles, destroyed roads, and damaged houses.
They built those houses, they renovated those houses, and it's the asset of their life. And they see that right now, maybe they won't be able to come back, so it's terrible.
This week, more than 500 people here had to leave their homes. One resident says in some areas, the water rose more than 2 meters.
The neighbors here and myself are fairly numb to the circumstances now, just seeing what's going to be next and if the province will help homeowners and business owners with anything, because we're in a floodplain. And this only happens every 100 years, but I guess the 100 years was yesterday.
Opposition leaders in Quebec are calling on the premier to do more to help residents better prepare for flooding like this.
In my part of the world, this is the 3rd flood in 7 years. People are growing tired and very tired of this. They want to see proper investments that are made, and I thought the Premier shut the door pretty quickly with regards to investments that needed to be made.
Those municipalities who deserve support in order to be ready for situations like those, because there are going to be many of those situations in the near future.
Likely to be top of mind as mayors from across Quebec are set to meet later this week. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
In BC, a normally quiet creek in the northern Okanagan suddenly spilled its banks, triggering a local evacuation order that forced nearby residents from their homes with little warning. A sudden hot snap causing a rush of meltwater is to blame. Neighbors in Parker's Cove, 70 kilometers north of Kelowna, filled sandbags to try and protect affected homes. Meanwhile, the wildfire situation in Alberta appears to be improving. People in Evansburg and Entwistle, about 100 kilometers west of Edmonton, are able to return to their homes. Their evacuation order lifted yesterday. Firefighters are still working to keep the town of Wildwood safe from a pair of wildfires. About 270 people are still unable to return home there. Well, there's an old saying that goes, when one door closes, another one opens. That appears to be what's happening in Canada's retail sector. The American chain Bed Bath & Beyond recently closed its stores here. Now, its vacant locations are being snatched up by Canadian companies, including a new brand. Kyle Bax explains.
Storefronts are all that's left as Bed Bath & Beyond has closed up shop across the country. But as one big box retailer disappears, a new Canadian retail chain is about to launch in many of the same locations. It's called Rooms and Spaces.
We kept an eye on what was happening with Bed Bath, and obviously with them exiting the market, we kind of just felt like there's an opportunity and there's a gap left in the market.
How's it going?
The Canadian entrepreneur has done this before, taking out-of-favor stores like HMV and relaunching his own version, Sunrise Records.
Which is kind of the story with most things that we buy. It's, good companies that have just lost their way.
One challenge will be carving out space amid all the competition from other home decor stores.
Today's customer is very fickle and they have a lot of choices online and offline. So if you don't have a differentiating factor, a product assortment that is different, that is relevant, and that is keeping pace with the customer and the customer's shifts and demands and what they're looking for, that is really the only way you're going to succeed, especially in bricks and mortar.
The Rooms and Spaces chain will launch in 5 different provinces beginning this summer. Meanwhile, Canadian Tire is taking over a smaller number of these vacant stores and converting them into Mark's Work Warehouse and Pro Hockey Life locations. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Calgary.
As we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX fell 53 points, the Dow dropped 270, and the dollar traded slightly up to 73.44 cents US. We'll be right back. An effort to ban sex education books from public libraries is growing in Canada. And as Emily Brass shows us, those calling for the bans are pushing their demands beyond library boards.
I would like to know why those taxes are going to the funding of the books.
Christine Ronceray has been to city council meetings, calling on them to defund local libraries.
Try sex toy for bonus fund.
She put together a pamphlet with graphic excerpts from books she wants banned.
This is not a censorship issue. This is having books that align with the Criminal Code of Canada. This is about showing pornography to children. So I'm not taking the right away from anybody to read books, but I am upholding the laws in Canada.
She and her collaborators have launched an aggressive campaign accusing librarians of being pedophiles and groomers. They're contacting politicians, the media, and small-town libraries on a daily basis.
You can give them an email every day. You can send them a phone call every day. Bombard. They need to hear this. We need to apply the pressure.
Library staff are feeling that pressure.
My staff are tired. My council members are tired. Staff sometimes don't know who's going to walk in the door and give them a hard time.
The library board also got a letter from the mayor of Winkler. Henry Siemens wants to reopen talks on taking the books out of circulation.
Usually there is a solution of a kind. It may not be the ideal solution for absolutely everyone.
Ching says while it might be easier just to give in, it's critical to uphold freedom of speech.
And they're all reputable books. Well-known authors, award winners, published, widely published.
Manitoba Libraries Association President Melanie Sucha says attempts to remove the books are appalling attacks on people's rights.
We can choose individually what information we want to share with our children and members of our families. we don't have the right to take that choice away from others.
Libraries are facing similar challenges in New Brunswick, Ontario, and BC. The Library Association is offering librarians toolkits on how to handle confrontations over access to books. Emily Brass, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The Eaton Centre's iconic geese sculptures have migrated back after a temporary removal.
So years ago, the logo for the Toronto Eaton Centre was a goose. There are literally thousands, maybe millions of people who have taken their pictures, their family photos, an engagement photo, something with the geese behind. They're not just a piece of the Eaton Centre, they're a piece of Toronto, they're a piece of Canadiana.
A ceremony was held to welcome their return. The aerial exhibit at Eaton Centre is called Flight Stop. It was designed by the late Toronto artist Michael Snow and had been on display since 1979. The geese were temporarily plucked away for mall renovations last year and were sent for professional restoration by Toronto Art Restoration. And it's a good thing those guys are indoors this week.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at this. Our radar's still showing the rain showers, that rotation, and you think it's done, and then you get a break, and then another wave comes through. So into the evening hours, still intermittent showers, some patchy fog possible through the overnight tonight and early tomorrow morning. And even tomorrow, I still have that chance of showers in here. You notice the peak of sunshine coming through too. At times, we'll likely see a bit of sun, and then that kind of enhances the risk of the showers developing again. So it's a kind of situation where we're still into this instability, and it's going to take another day where we kind of lose that and things improve further. But temperature up to 11 degrees for tomorrow. We got up to 10 today, so 10 to 11 for tomorrow. And then Friday, 13, the climb. Saturday, Sunday, we're going to find temperatures back closer to seasonal or even a little bit above, but you'll notice I've got just a 30% chance of showers in Friday, and then I take it out after that.
All right. Can't wait for that weekend. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
And that's our show for you tonight. Thank you for joining us. We will see you back here tomorrow at 6. Try to stay dry out there, everyone, and have a great night. Good night.